For the first time in the history of the channel, I didn't make a Game of the Year video for 2024. It would have been the channel's 10th, because in June of last year, Writing on Games celebrated its 10th birthday. There are a lot of dramatic reasons people might come up with as to why I skipped it. I've fallen out of love with video games, I hate making videos, just like my comments often tell me I do. Those same comments sometimes also tell me to just cut the intro to these things and get to the list of games, as if that list without context as to why I gravitated towards those games would actually mean anything to anyone. You may or may not have noticed, but I wasted a whole lot less words last year trying to second guess and appease any daft argument someone might have in the comments. People are going to misinterpret whatever you say. Life is better for this change. Look, I still love games and I still love making videos. Legitimately, the truth is just that, well, the last couple of years have been really busy. Increasingly busy, to the point that right now, I'm not sure where I'll find the time to handle everything I have on my plate. It's had an effect. Whenever people ask me how I'm doing, I never really know what to say other than defaulting to looking down at the ground and exasperatedly telling them it's been a blur. Just because it's a default response designed to keep from having to dig into the nitty-gritty of that blur doesn't mean it's not entirely correct. I default to it because I don't know how to describe it otherwise. I can't make sense of it. I exist moment to moment with the hope that I'm creating, or at least building up to creating, something meaningful. I'm in several active bands. I joined Ashenspire, who you might know from their album Hostile Architecture, and I played my first shows with them earlier last year. I made music with so many people. I made countless albums on my own. I mixed and mastered other projects. I started editing scripts for people. I've made huge steps to diversify beyond just the channel you're currently watching. Part of that is the fear of how much longer I'll actually be able to keep doing this. But the work I've been doing for Writing on Games, as hard as it's been to keep things running all this time, that work that I hoped would pay dividends last year, but in actuality has stretched into this one, has made for some of the videos I've been most excited about across the entire 10 years of doing this. I can't wait for you to see the fruits of that labor. Am I burnt out? Completely. I would have said I was running on absolute fumes long before now, and yet I persist because, well, bills have got to be paid somehow. As I more directly dealt with conditions that have become truly overwhelming the last several years, my therapist at one point told me they would love it if I could just take 3 months off to not have to worry about this, about work. And as much as I appreciate the sentiment and know it's coming from a caring place, it also had me momentarily, jokingly, wondering what planet they thought we were living on. Confronting the idea that I've been dealing with what has turned out to be pretty severe OCD basically my entire life has taken up so much of my time and energy these past couple of years, on top of, well, everything else I've had to do just to get through the months. And as an aside, as much as it gets said, I really truly mean it. I don't know how I would have survived the last couple of years if it wasn't for the support of my wonderful patrons, especially when times are so tough for everyone right now. If the work I've been doing has brought you some kind of joy or helped you make sense of some things over the years, and you can afford to, every pledge to the Patreon really helps more than you can possibly know. Hell, you can even join on YouTube if that's more your deal. Either way, however you've continued to support the channel over the years, however big or small, thank you. It all means the absolute world to me. But that's not all. Like I say, I've been doing a lot of different work for a lot of different people, and a lot of work is currently going into formalizing some of that. I'll have more details in the coming months, but it's incredibly exciting stuff. For now, if you want me to edit your writing, do some writing for your outlet, mock reviews, do you want me to edit your video, edit or mix or master your audio, whether it's a podcast for YouTube or an EP or album your band has made, I'm easy to get in touch with. My email is on the About page of my channel. I've been told my rates are pretty ridiculously good for the experience I've garnered over the years and the value people have found in my services. Anyway, self-promo chunk out of the way, the point is, while it's been hard and I've constantly had that thought of how long can I keep doing this, I've also been feeling more and more grateful that I get to do it at all. It's certainly energized me to go true screw it mode with wild video ideas this year, which is incredibly invigorating. I've played a ton of games, of course I have, but I've been playing them more on my own terms. Anyone that's done this for long enough will tell you about the peril of not recording every second of your playthrough of a game on the off chance you might need a specific segment should you one day decide that you want to make a video. Well, peril of perils, I barely recorded any of the games I played this year. I played most of them on a couch. I put them down to easy mode if I was more interested in something they were saying beyond their challenge. I didn't push myself to finish a game I'd started if I didn't feel like it. Absolutely wild stuff, I know. If anything though, it made me appreciate games more than I have done in years prior. Whoever said games are dying for any reason other than the people that make them keep getting fired so the line can keep going up is truly blind to reality. I also watched a ton of movies last year and just delved into art more holistically, providing enough ideas for videos to last the channel a whole other decade beyond this last one. More importantly than all of that though, in amongst the emotional and physical tempest of the last couple of years, it's been a time in which I found the most valuable thing has been getting right with myself, gaining a bit of perspective. I've been thinking lately about what I actually want out of life, what I don't have now that would make my life better. For some people, it's owning a house, a car, something like that. For me, well, I'm tired, I'm skint, I'm living very much month to month, but I do have a roof over my head. The next meal isn't a desperate struggle like it has been at certain points of my life. Those two things alone, I am unbelievably thankful for every day. I have a lot of people in my life that I care deeply about and who care about me back. I get to wake up every day and just make things. I've worked real hard, almost entirely on my own, to make that my career for the last decade. And with all of that in mind, if the only thing I can think of that I could really truly want aside from that is maybe just a little bit more money purely so I didn't have to worry about it so consistently, then, well, it's hard to say I don't live a pretty good full life. I guess with everything going on, the past couple of years, I felt like I found some true, genuine hope. A view for the potential for things to improve for almost the first time in my entire life. There is a true beauty to that feeling, and I am holding on to that hope for all it's fucking worth. In so many ways, I am furiously angry about the genocidal tech hell that we are being expected to live under, that views brutalizing innocent people as normal, that sees workers to be as expendable as they view art or human decency, life. And so I tried to make changes that would make things better. I boycotted certain things. I made more conscious choices about where my money is going. I tried to make sure those around me were okay. I made really loud, abrasive art. All things I intend to keep doing long into this year and beyond. And the games that really struck a chord with me last year reflected that attitude somewhat. Aggressively weird, loud, small, personal, with each item on this main list feeling like a real thrashing against perceived norms of how we interact with art, how the world interacts with or against us. And so, I felt like it would be cool to take some time and return to one of the things that previously felt like a really nice way to wrap up the year, remembering all the games that gave me joy. And with all that preamble out of the way, it's time for the Writing on Games top 5 games of 2025 that I've played obviously, with some honourable mentions thrown in for good measure. And to start things off at number 5, we have Despelote. There's something to be said for art that really, truly hones in on the personal. This is a game about a dude who grew up in Ecuador, relaying his experience of a country in the throes of World Cup mania. A nation for whom football is almost a religious experience, finally qualifying for the chance to go up against the absolute best, and a nation whose own sense of identity is wrapped up in all kinds of geopolitical turmoil. But the reality is, and it's to the game's credit that the tone and texture of that place is captured so well, that this stuff really is just that, texture. Because what Despelote is, as I see it, is a coming-of-age game about memory. The haze of it. It's a series of disparate snapshots from one particular person, one particular perspective, one that, as a small kid, isn't so concerned with the dollarization of Ecuador, one that doesn't quite comprehend the bigness of the world outside of him, of kicking a football about. It's remembrance as a means of understanding that experience on the periphery, flanking that beautifully innocent world he's so consumed by. One of video games, of hiding under the table at parties as a kid, of messing around in class and getting home late. It's deciphering as far as possible what his parents must have been going through, feeling, what Ecuador must have been feeling. Can a country, a landmass, a population feel as one? Over the 2 hours it takes to beat Despelote, not a lot truly happens. It's not exactly a spoiler to say that Ecuador did not win the 2002 World Cup. The world continues, and yet at the end of that journey, it feels like a clarity washes over the whole experience, reminding you that the world was crazier than you thought when you were young, when it all whizzed by you. There are things you wish you remember more clearly, but there's beauty in that haze, as striking in its opaque luminescence, as much as its fleeting nature highlights the importance of appreciating the little things, of being present in the current moment as much as possible, before that moment fades into nothingness. Through that drilling down on the hyper-personal, Despelote serves as concrete proof that we can often end up with some of the most novel, captivating means of exploring those more universal truths. And moving on to a different vibe entirely, at number 4 we have Thrasher. If I could pick one word to describe Thrasher, the recent game from Brian Gibson of Lightning Bolt, and one half of the team behind 2016's legendary Thumper, it would be deceptive. It's a game that asks you, what are you scared of? This game is easy, there's nothing to worry about. All while my hands are drenched in sweat, and after playing, I feel like I need to physically unclench my jaw. Its goal behind its psychedelic visuals is really rather simple. Control your little eel thing and smash through the lighter barriers while avoiding the red ones. And what's more, the time limit is surprisingly lenient. Indeed, where Thumper represented a roller coaster ride so fast that you could only hope to stay on the rails, Thrasher instead sees you controlling that pace. There's really nothing to say that you couldn't just take your time and rather calmly move from wave to wave. But that's not the game Thrasher is. You may have greater control over this ride, but you are not truly in the driver's seat. You'll see that grade come up at the end of each wave, flashing on screen just long enough to let you know how badly you messed up, but moving on to the next wave too quickly for you to do anything about it. You'll see S after S after S rank pop up before one tiny thing goes wrong and that resultant B eats away at you, throws you off course. You try to make it up in the next wave, try to bring up the average for the whole stage, but in doing so, in consciously trying to go faster, trying to be more efficient with your movements, those now precious seconds tick away as failure begets failure. And suddenly, this calm game has become more fast-paced, more adrenaline-blasting than even Thumper could achieve in its most hectic 9-8 freakouts later on. For such a simple goal with seemingly such simple playing pieces, just trying to keep up with where you are in the maelstrom of flashes and bangs and things whirring around the screen becomes a very deliberate challenge in itself. Indeed, the rhythm of Thumper kept me nailed to that track for hours at a time. There was at least a central pulse I could lean on. The musician in me was satisfied. Take that away, and suddenly the world of Thrasher becomes oppressively abstract. to such an extent that I can only play it for a couple of stages at a time before having to decompress, and I've loved every minute of it. It's such a fascinatingly designed game whose mechanical core is rock solid, to be clear. It just makes total sense that someone like Brian Gibson, when trying to think of where to take the thumper aesthetic next, how it could evolve, would lean into the impulse that informs his music. At once exploratory, experimental, and wonderfully primitive, Thrasher is an arcade high-score game at its core, with the mechanical purity that suggests. Just one where each individual element is blown up to apocalyptic proportions, where it feels like any single wrong move you make will bring about the end of all things. It's Pac-Man if the ghosts could physically kill you, and it's one of the most thrilling games I played all year. And at number 3, we have To a T. I'm willing to bet that there aren't many people watching this for whom fitting in hasn't been a major struggle for them at various points in their life. Keita Takahashi, legendary creator of the Katamari series, so extremely fervent in his belief that play can change the world that his oddity left him alienated from such a commercial industry, knows that dilemma all too well. But where games like the creator's prior release, Watam, see us envision a world where we can reconsider the value of things after some world-disrupting apocalyptic event, and for all of this game's bright, colourful whimsy, To a T is possibly the creator at his most direct and honestly most angry at a world that fails to accommodate those that don't fit what society deems as quote normal. Don't get me wrong, it's not an angry game per se, it's similarly utopian to that prior work Watam, celebrating a protagonist whose condition forces them to take up more space than those around them. Relative to other games that might make the struggles of that condition the main focus, there's surprisingly little drama afforded to any of that here. From the start, the game repeatedly chants in absurdly catchy fashion that you are the perfect shape. There's nothing wrong with your character, and even those making fun of you are quickly shown the error of their ways, as they realize that in this world filled to bursting with proudly different beings, they are the ones that stick out for their unwillingness to understand what people might be going through. Instead then, whatever weirdness exists within the game does so as an examination and cherishing of the strange little rituals and processes we create for ourselves, as a means of making sense of an often chaotic world. Go to bathroom, then pour cereal, then pour milk, then eat, then brush teeth, then put shoes on to go to the horrible learning building. Teens' condition isn't weird, we all are, and To a T basks in that eccentricity, once again, as in Watam, using play to question every aspect of our society. You know, I might not be T-shaped, but I can relate like hell to the constant dread of going to a school whose function didn't make sense to me, but that I was nonetheless expected to unquestioningly accept, to excel in. I can relate to getting distracted in class, missing the barrage of numbers the teacher threw at me, and then floundering as he turns to me for an answer. I can relate to getting bullied, being made to feel like there's something wrong with you. If only my brain could just function, fit in like everyone else, then I'd be okay. I've definitely had long periods where it felt like the only being I could effectively communicate with was my old dog. God, I miss Scruff. I really tried constantly to mold myself in a way that would gel with the way the world is supposed to function, and I just as constantly judged myself as a failure. Felt a boatload of shame and self-loathing when it felt like the world around me wouldn't accept anything less than perfect sublimation to its whims. All this to say, I always had an inkling as to why I was so drawn to Keita Takahashi's games, but To a T is, well, aptly named in its directness. There's a lot of art out there about the triumph of finally fitting in and being accepted by the world around you. To a T and Takahashi's art at large screams to the misfits in all its absurd, colourful, beautiful glory. Fuck that world. Let's make our own. And with that, my runner-up for Game of the Year is Skin Deep. It makes me so happy that almost 10 years on from the last list they were featured on, a new Blendo game has made its way into yet another of these videos. From the moment I booted up the demo back during the Steam Next Fest it was featured in, I was immediately reminded why I love this developer so much, what makes them so singular. Indeed, Quadrilateral Cowboy is a game I think about a lot to this day, and as soon as I picked up a leaflet in Skin Deep with its mid-century Atomic Age inspired style alerting me to a hip new way to jumpstart your heart upon death, where the plans of violent space pirates could be thwarted with a banana peel thrown in their path at the behest of a square-headed cat, I knew the full game was going to be like slipping into a weird old jacket you found hiding in a cupboard somewhere. Perhaps loud, gaudy, some holes here or there, but man, it still fits you just right. 2025 gave us a lot of great comedic games, but none are as hell-bent on putting control of that comedy in your hands, of having you not simply witnessing a punchline, but of manufacturing the setup, of improvising in the moment when things go wrong. Importantly though, Skin Deep manages all of this while also making for an incredibly robust, often intense, immersive sim. It's just that the mechanics of that tension are deeply, deeply hilarious. It's a stealth game with the patience and careful analysis such an experience expects, colliding with and complicated by the chaos of frenzied resource management, creating a mushroom cloud of systemic unpredictability within the confines of these cramped interiors, as you pick up anything and everything in your path and throw it into the maelstrom just as quickly. It's bedlam entirely of your own making. In a way, it's actually fairly similar to something like John Wick, where both John and players of Skin Deep will be forced into a corner, pick what feels like the least bad option, and then react to the consequences of that option. And just as John's often overtly comedic encounters take as much inspiration from the likes of Buster Keaton as John Woo, so too does Skin Deep become farce at the same time as the protagonist is picking shards of glass out of their feet, John McClane style. It's hard for games to effectively, intentionally simulate slapstick, to have the confidence to craft the potential for systems to interweave, then leave the in-between with all of its potential for utterly ridiculous outcomes to the players themselves. But every system, every object has been designed with such purpose that it doesn't really matter what the interactions between them are. That's for you to find out. Indeed, it's a stealth game where I nonetheless left a trail of bodies and chaos in my wake. And not only did I feel like I was playing the game exactly as intended, genre contradictions and all, but even when I failed, it felt like a result of my own experimentation, and the end result was always hilarious. I don't know, Skin Deep really invigorated me in a way I totally needed last year. It helped remind me, in the same way Quadrilateral Cowboy did way back when, that there's still wondrous fun to be found in this often dire industry. It reminds you that even when you're stuck in the same old ship replying to the same emails to the same daft cats your character hates interacting with, essentially when you're stuck in a corporate nightmare that turns fighting space pirates into the equivalent of a do-nothing email job, there's still something so cozy about being in a Blendo world. Its reference points of Googie architecture and space-age design present a future at once bleak in its boxiness and delightfully quaint in its failed retro-futuristic optimism, encouraging you to think, well, we're in hell anyway, so what's to stop us poking and prodding at the boundaries, of lobbing a box of pepper at a glass window and seeing what gets sucked into the void. Even if that void takes us, Blendo Games makes sure that we can at least get a good chuckle out of that path to oblivion. And you know, at one point I would have said there was zero chance that anything else could take the #1 spot for me. That was until one game came along later in the year and completely upended this entire list in drastically unexpected ways. But before we get to what that game is, it's time for some unranked honourable mentions. It's hard to convey just how deeply Mafia the Old Country is exactly what I wanted out of a new Mafia game. Ditching the empty open world ambitions of its predecessor 3, here we have a title where the surface of an open world design, its promises of freedom and conquest, deliberately give way to a fascinating character study about a man explicitly unable to achieve it. Just like the good old days. A gripping tragedy set against the backdrop of some of the most glorious painterly vistas I've seen in modern games. Who cares that you can't blow up that vineyard when it looks this good? Skate Story takes the mechanical template of Pro Skater and expands it to mythic proportions. Learning how to ollie is presented as arcane knowledge via the Forbidden Tome. The security guards stopping you from skating through the mall become ever watchful, biblically accurate eyeballs. Instead of skate, you collect the letters for demon. It's certainly a game where you aren't there for the skate story as much as the skate presentation of said skate story, to be sure, but the skating feels shockingly solid. Like, how has it been so difficult for people to make something like this that isn't just Tony Hawk for so long? Great fundamentals given a truly surreal coat of paint. Fantastic stuff. Death Stranding 2 came straight off the heels of my revisiting the first game and finally recognizing it as one of my favourite games ever made. And so, the prospect of walking across yet one more continent had me absolutely giddy. A lot was discussed about how it had been made easier or less hostile, the combat was more fleshed out, but honestly, as someone who just recently played through the original, there's really not a whole lot different in feel between the two games. It still has all the vestigial features and systems while doubling down on the unfortunate stunt casting of the original, but it is still easily the game I put the most hours into in 2025. If I had actually finished the first Hades before making that year's Game of the Year list, it probably would have topped it. I've similarly not finished Hades 2, but I also can't say I feel quite the same draw to return to it as I did that first game. The beauty of that original's density was in its narrative structure, less in its peripheral systems. This game flips the script on that formula somewhat, with so many currencies and things to keep track of during battle that for me distract a little from the snappiness and simplicity that made that first game tick. It must be said though that Hades at its worst still beats the majority of games at their best, and I have a feeling that against all odds, this will end up my most played Steam Deck game in 2026. Haste is an entry here that demands a little context, because I did not play this on its default setting, as intended I suppose. Instead, seeking out only its namesake, I turned all the difficulty settings down, effectively erasing most of the challenge of its roguelite run-based structure, but aside from still having to skip the completely nothingy story, this approach helped cut to the core of some of the most kinesthetically satisfying movement mechanics I've experienced in quite some time. Careful item management with this playstyle goes out the window as you absolutely soar across these pretty gargantuan landscapes, managing instead your momentum to match the undulations of the ground below you, that ground that you will hopefully, thrillingly, rarely touch for very long. It's Sonic on steroids and it is a total rush. Perhaps controversially, I wasn't nearly as enthralled by Clair Obscur Expedition 33 as, well, seemingly the entire game's population. As a Legend of Dragoon fan, the combat system certainly appealed to me more than most turn-based RPGs, even if I found the parry system to be a little inconsistent. I enjoyed where the story went, it was well written, well performed, but almost more than what was in the game was the way it was structured. What I heard someone else describe as Persona for the employed. Indeed, Clair Obscur just kind of goes, and while I wasn't particularly interested in seeking out every nook and cranny of this world, I had around 15 to 20 hours of a good story, I put it down and moved on with my life. Maybe not the bastion of the industry that it's been heralded as by so many, but it also in no way has to be. And look, I'm sorry for being such a cynical prick here, but the collective delusion that my peers seemingly fell under has to be addressed. Most of the soundtrack to Lumines Arise is truly awful. The rave stuff, the Bonobo-esque trip-hop, the occasional breakbeat here or there, that stuff is competent. Basically any track with vocals, however, goes full-blown Chainsmokers corporate pop EDM that could feasibly soundtrack a PowerPoint for BP. It's the kind of music you're forced to listen to when you forget your headphones at the gym. To confirm suspicions I had while playing, I searched mega church music, and the first result, as dire as it was, would have fit perfectly in Lumines Arise. But as much as I similarly did not vibe with its vague visual allusions to humanity coming together as one via flash mobs, and lyrics talking about how I am here and you are near and no more fear, you are my dear, we are shooting stars, Lumines Arise is still a ludicrously fun, ridiculously challenging puzzle game. Just be sure to play it on mute. And with all of that out of the way, I'm happy to reveal that the Writing on Game's best game of 2025 is Baby Steps. Even accounting for recency bias, I was fairly sure that when I rolled credits on Baby Steps, that I had just finished a new all-time favourite game, and the months since have only proven that to be the case. Ever since reaching the top of that damned mountain step by hard-fought step, it's a game I have not been able to stop thinking about. Look, I always appreciated the work of Bennett Foddy from a distance, and to be clear up front, of course he was not the only person to work on this, just perhaps the most infamous name on that credits list, and the one whose work I am most familiar with. Co-op was a funny little experiment. Getting over it was a really interesting comedic interrogation into what it means to progress in a video game. But, well, ironically, these games were likely clearer in their notion of a win state than Baby Steps. They felt less like traditional games and more like art pieces to me. Fascinating, but too deliberately frustrating for me to ever want to pick up and play beyond a cursory glance and chuckle. Baby Steps, ostensibly co-op but in 3D, seemed like it would follow a similar template. What I could never have expected was a truly densely packed world, housing such a heartfelt story that it had me legitimately welling up at multiple points towards the game's conclusion. See, a big reason why Baby Steps so resonated with me is that, while it certainly will make you work for it, it's a game that truly wants its central doofus Nate to make it to the top. It desperately wants you to succeed. What success looks like, however, is far more complicated than just making it up the mountain alone. For one, it's far less harsh than Foddy's typical fare. Especially as the game reaches its more difficult sections later on, it is unafraid to rob you of progress should you miscalculate the solidity of your underfoot grip. But the margin for error is skewed pretty heavily in your favour most of the time. Indeed, a huge part of the game's comedy spawns from Nate's oafish form, nonetheless belying almost balletic balance and grace. It's also this grace, the shocking ease with which you can develop a lumbering rhythm with Nate's hulking hamstrings, that sees every player encouraged to explore rather than simply beeline it to the top. Meaning that each and every step in this ludicrously dense world better allows every player to tell their own story within it. It's a game that almost always allows you to really take that time to calculate the next step's risk for yourself, with countless of the tensest moments emerging from angling Nate's gangly legs, hovering over the slightest groove in a rock face, weighing up the potential for simply releasing a trigger to send me tumbling into the abyss I spent so long climbing out of. But just as much as the tension it provides, one of the true benefits of this approach is what each step subsequently tells us about the character of Nate. See, Nate is a man that would rather climb a mountain in pajamas and bare feet than ask for some help in this ridiculously grueling journey he's been so unceremoniously dumped into. He He begins said journey completely unable to function outside of the cramped anime weed dungeon he's locked himself within, back in his parents' basement. The false comfort of his home life is then immediately, violently replaced with the complete envelopment of nature. The kind of landscape that you could picture Werner Herzog standing in, describing as having been created by God in anger. Nate, it's badly produced, half-finished sentence within the enormous articulation of such an uncaring world. It's music sounding like one of Steve Reich's early tape pieces, but with incessant chicken squawking, recalling nothing if not Herzog's assessment of the jungle that the birds don't sing, but rather screech in pain. Oh, and Nate's not just dealing with people, but naked horsemen, so it goes. But even in these seemingly hostile circumstances, given the relative ease with which we are able to get to grips with Nate's rhythm of movement, this isn't a situation in which Nate can't discover a new kind of comfort. The denizens of this world, which initially elicit such a frenzied, stuttered plea from our protagonist to simply leave him alone, eventually find Nate developing an uneasy rapport with, even if such a connection is merely a necessity to get through a difficult social encounter. He learns, he's able to at least partially mask his way through difficult conversation. These tete-a-tetes, at least in the player's mind, and given the checkpoints they represent, come to evoke rest, safety, dare I say, comfort. Nate becomes more comfortable on his own, as I discussed in a video that perhaps understandably not many people watched, although I do think it's one of my favourite videos I've worked on in recent years. One of the most meaningful experiences came from going off the beaten path. So far, in fact, that I came across a football pitch and had Nate spend 20 full minutes scoring a goal. His eventual meek yay feeling as triumphant as any tumultuous climb. He begins to feel more comfortable disregarding people's advice if he doesn't think it fits his style. He'll get told there's nothing at the top of a tower, and he'll insist that it doesn't matter and he wants to see it for himself. Escaping this world, as alien to Nate in its insistence on simply communicating with other human beings, as it is its hostile rocky terrain, becomes less and less of a priority, especially as the rather harrowing reason for his being there becomes apparent. Indeed, Baby Steps almost certainly knowingly punches way above its weight narratively, not only hiding within its decidedly wacky walking mechanics and daft, deeply positive improv comedy cutscenes, the kinds of emotional gut punches that left me absolutely rocked, but carry them all off with an ease that makes it all feel like part of the joke. Oh, you expected this game about this dude to be silly at all times? Well, let's just drop one of the most emotionally affecting moments in all of video games on you when you least expect it. The game is filled with those moments where I'll find I'd have a lump in my throat and have to do a double take. Like, this caused that? I think the keenest example of that duality at work, though, is the surprise that despite all the odds, I actually saw something of myself in this guy. This overgrown man-child whose surface level issues I thought I had long grown out of. See, while it certainly makes for a satisfying challenge, without spoiling anything, the success is not simply Nate making it up the mountain against all odds. It's the tragically hilarious realization of just how much easier it would have been had he just asked for, accepted the help offered to him. For sure, as the now infamous Manbreaker challenge will attest to, there is certainly a kind of inner strength, a self-actualization in conquering a mountain where the stairs are right there. It's also the case that one of the key dilemmas of the game that continues right up until the end of that game is that Nate can barely bring himself to ask for some privacy to use the bathroom. So much of my life, I've had to take things on by myself. I've been seen as a failure if I didn't. I've held on to a whole lot of truly corrosive emotional turmoil because it feels like such a burden to put that on other people. It eats away at you, locking you in your own holding pattern of stress and worry that bad things that happen to you are going to happen again, that you'll never make sense of what is wrong with your brain that you so struggle to just exist day to day. day, do the most mundane stuff that other people seem to be able to do with such ease, such cold, mocking ease. And then you talk to the people close to you, the people who have been around you all this time, who have been helping you in ways you didn't even know. Those people, those other misfits that you love so dearly, that assure you that the problems you're facing aren't your fault and that they can help, that they want to help, that you're easy to help. And you do start to feel a little daft for holding on to so much for so long. In these moments, all you can really do is laugh at how absurd it all is. And after that laughter, things get less difficult. Not easy by any means, there are always further mountains to climb, and taking those steps requires as much effort as it ever did, but you feel less in danger, you feel less alone. Baby steps, against all odds, made me feel less alone. And far from conquering its mountainous challenges, that to me is its biggest success of all. That is why Baby Steps is the best game of 2025. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, you can help me out by liking, subscribing, becoming a channel member via the join button, and even hyping now, which apparently costs you nothing if that option is available to you. It all helps more than you know. A massive thanks as well to my patrons, who you can see on screen and are all getting access to exclusive, fully produced videos that aren't available here. Your continued support on patreon.com/writingongames is what allows me to keep going with the work I do on this channel, and I seriously cannot express how grateful I am for that. You are all the best. Special thanks go to Alistair Dunn, Alex O'Sullivan, Oride, Brendan Hess, Bryce Snyder, Cameron Sinistros, Charles J. Liu, Charlie Kimball, Christopher Farity, Dallas Keane, Danis Sikauskis, David Björk, David Butkus, Dolly Bowman, Ewan Patterson, Leah Chinello, Lynn Browning, Luke Shaw, Mark B. Writing, Mason Miller, Matthew Grover, Michael Tritt, Rickety Cricket, Thomas Ife, Timothy Jones, Vitautis Catharsis, Young Condor, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.